All right, team, we are going to try something fun today for hand yoga. We are going to get some steps. Right now I'm at 1,500 and we're going to be stepping and doing hand yoga at the same time. So make sure you are somewhere safe. I'm going to be on my trampoline, bouncing, walking. You can walk in place and just stand still. At your own discretion and thoughtfulness, think about if you normally watch TV while you're on the treadmill. If you do that, then maybe you could do this on the treadmill. I'm going to try to describe everything really carefully with my words as well. So you could just listen to the audio and go for a walk outside in nature also. All right, here we go. Hands. We're going to begin warming up, bouncing, walking, stepping. And we'll just tap our fingers to our thumbs. This is a nice way to get started. If it's cold outside, you can be wearing gloves while you're listening to this and bouncing. And elbows are going to be relatively straight here. So I know that, as you can tell, I am a quilter. And when I'm quilting, I spend a lot of times with my elbows bent. And I find I love sleeping with my elbows bent too, kind of naughty. And so straight arms, super helpful here. And I'm just tapping, waking up my hands. And now we can gently tap our hands against our legs. This is wonderful for circulation. Depending on how you're walking or bouncing, it could also be nice to tap on the stomach around my belly buttons here. So I'm just tapping around my belly button. This is a wonderful movement that I learned from Dan Yoga. It's a Korean style of yoga, D-A-H-N. And they do a lot of tapping in that style. We've done that tapping up our arms. So you can tap your stomach, or if you want your elbows straighter, which I usually do, you can tap your sides. Some of these movements for while we're walking are going to be more incognito. Nobody really will notice if you're doing something strange. Now, others are more obvious. This one makes some sound. It'd be nice to just be okay with that. And now we'll relax. We want to just tune in, not necessarily close our eyes because we want to be aware of our surroundings, but tune in and notice the effects of our hand yoga so far. We might feel some tingling, warmth, activity in our hands. And now we'll turn the back of our hand so it's facing forward. We'll align with our tailbone and we can flex at the wrist, gently flexing forward and back. If your hands are anywhere else not aligned with your tailbone, that's fine too. So you can see that I sewed the quilt behind me, but I also sewed both my shirt and my leggings. It's a repurposed Espelon tequila shirt that I turned into a tank. And my leggings, I sewed from some stretch cotton by hand with pearl cotton thread. Didn't need any elastic because I made this waistband with fabric. Mended it a few times also. We're still flexing at our wrists. And now we'll relax. We can let our hands move, just sway forward and back, noticing the effects, relaxing our wrists. And no, I don't have a pattern for either. I just cut up a pair of leggings that fit good, but I didn't feel like mending them anymore, and traced that pair of leggings that fit me. And now we're going to do some twisting. So as though we had a jar in both hands and we were opening and closing that jar, we want this twist to originate at our shoulders and extend all the way into our fingers. It can be great to memorize this routine eventually, because then when you're going for a walk in nature, you're able to just do these movements intuitively. That's part of why we're spending some time on each one, so that you can remember it well. Certainly if it starts to feel tiresome, if it doesn't feel good anymore, you can pause early and just relax, tune in, notice how your hands feel. And now we'll all join you, just resting our hands. Here we'll do one of my favorites, a gentle open and close of our hands. Hopefully everyone has this one memorized by now if you've watched my other videos. We're opening about 70% and closing about 70%. So we're not forming a tight fist and we're not stretching wide. We're going short of both of those. This very gentle opening and closing of our hands is wonderful if you do a lot of tight gripping, the way that I tightly grip a needle and thread. I find actually that my non-dominant hand, it does a lot of work when I'm quilting as well. And it's just constantly gripping and holding the edge of the quilt while I send the needle through. And that constant gripping is actually has caused a little bit of stiffness, like a sticky feeling in my fingers. And that is when I got really turned on to doing this. And that gentleness and the moving is helpful for letting go of some of that stickiness. I don't experience that in my hands anymore. Hand yoga can be very deceptive. A lot of times we think we have to work hard in order to get results. And our hands are working hard for us all the time. So the truth is that to get results for our hands, gentleness is often a really good path. Just opening and closing. And then we'll rest. Making sure that you have a little bit of space around you and being thoughtful if you are stationary like I am, or if you're walking, you may want to slow down. We're going to just spin our hands from side to side, allowing our forearms and our hands to land on our body with momentum. So this is a massage for our abdomen, for our digestive system, as well as a massage for our hands and our forearms. And this is what it looks like from the other side. And we'll rest. So if you're like me, you might feel encouraged by checking in with your step status. I'm at 2,700 now. I know these are trampoline steps and my feet aren't leaving the trampolines. It's a little different than if I was really walking, but it is a step in the right direction. I didn't even know that was a pen. There we go. It is. Definitely feels different from sitting still and practicing hand yoga. Let's return now to our finger taps to our thumb. This can be a good cognitive challenge too, stretching your mental ability. So you might choose to circle around. You might choose to alternate. You might choose to go back and forth with a double tap on either end. Or you can see here it's more circular. That is a mental challenge for sure. And then go the other direction, right? Counterclockwise, or an internal rotation instead of external. So see if you can create a variety of patterns with your fingers. This kind of light touch is very powerful. There's also a whole world of finger tapping that I am not aware of or an expert of, but I know when I did my yoga teacher training back in 2012 and 13, one of my co-teachers was a chiropractor, and part of his practice was tapping fingers. And then when I was working with an occupational therapist, she also suggested this finger tapping movement. So it's a very light touch, but there's a mental benefit that comes with practicing this. And rest. We can take a wider tap, letting our arms move again with some momentum, just like we did when we were swinging from side to side. I feel like I'm doing jumping jacks here, but you can easily do this while you're walking as well. I went for a walk yesterday and practiced all of this for you guys. And rest. We'll rest our hands now flat against our sides or against our stomach, whatever felt good for you before. But this time we're going to open and close our hands. This I learned from my occupational therapist to do against the table. My leg works just as well, or my coat in the winter. And you want to make sure that your hand is resting against something as you move from open to closed. It's a very gentle sliding movement. So another way to practice is like this. Of course, this has bent elbows, but depending on your outfit, depending on your stride, the way that you walk, one may be infinitely easier than the other. And rest. Now, you'll remember that before we flexed forward and back, we're going to do something a little different. Now we're going to flex our hand from side to side. So we were forward and backward flexing, now side to side. I like to have my thumb reach forward and pinky reach back. For a while, again, for me on my right hand, this would feel stiff. Once in a while I'd feel like, oh, that's weird. And I probably pay attention to it because I'm into hand yoga and also because of my love for quilting. But ultimately I realized it was because of my water pitcher. I have a special water filtration system. It's different from a Brita. It's a very long rectangular pitcher, and I was picking it up when it was heavy and pouring things. And once I started supporting it from the bottom with my left hand, all of that pain went away. But I think this is still a wonderful movement, and you can do this against your body too if that makes it easier. We're just stretching from thumb to pinky. So it's been an important lesson for me to not jump to blaming quilting for everything. Quilting is the thing that I love. And it's also important to remember that a lack of movement can cause just as many problems as a repetitive movement. So we just need to find the right things to counteract the movements that we do repeatedly. I know certainly typing with my thumb on my iPhone is another big thing that I try to be careful of not overdoing. And we'll rest. We're about halfway through. This is going to be a half-hour video, so we're at 17 minutes. We're doing great. Can check in again and feel proud of ourselves on our steps. I'm at 3,500, so that means I've done 2,000 steps so far. And this next movement, I'm gonna make sure I'm still so you can see it clearly. We're gonna flex at the root of our fingers. So just flexing forward and back. You can hold your hands any way that feels good for this movement. I like to say motion is lotion. So any moving that you're doing of your hands is great. This again can help with that trigger finger feeling, that stickiness that might happen in a hand. And we'll rest. Now we're going to do two movements that are good at restoring the sensitivity of your fingers. If you have any calluses built up, especially in my youth, I was really into pottery and throwing on the potter's wheel. So I'm just going to rub my thumb against my fingers, feeling that texture of my thumb and my fingers. And because I was working with pottery so much, and I'm sure other things too, I built up some calluses on my fingers. There's a little test that they can do where they brush your finger with a different gauge of something that to me looks like fishing line. And depending on how fine or thick it has to be, they can measure how sensitive your fingers are. So my fingers have lost a little bit of sensitivity. And this type of movement can help to bring that back, or at least keep what I have. We'll shift now to doing that same kind of movement against your clothing. So we're working on the sensitivity of our fingers, our ability to feel things by feeling a variety of textures. So touching our skin was a good texture. Our legs is a good texture. In a moment, we're going to try to find another texture. So maybe if you have a coat or a sweater or gloves on, you can also just touch your skin. For example, if you have some hair on your arms, most people do. Mine, you can't see that well, but it's there. So next up, we're going to find a different texture to touch. So I'm going to touch these stitches on my shirt. Those are a rougher texture. and this is just bouncing and I'm not like lifting up or anything, but I can feel a little sweaty. I'm getting something good for my body done here and doing hand yoga. So I'm going to find that fourth texture, which for me is going to be my arm hair. And I'm going to try to move lightly enough that I'm more touching the hairs than my skin. And this I'm going to have to do one hand at a time. It seems I wouldn't really be able to feel it properly, even though I could touch both at the same time. That sensory, that sensation of feeling is what we're really looking to focus on. Touching my watch could be another interesting. Once you start on this path, especially if you are doing this intuitively on a walk outside, you can really start to find a lot of textures, and depending on where you are and what seems appropriate, pausing and feeling the bark on some trees, pausing to feel the texture of the grass or the gravel or the sidewalk or moss. It's amazing to think that feeling the textures of things like that has a benefit for your hands. It's same as if you are smelling a lot of smells, or if you only smell the same thing all the time, can improve that ability. Okay, I'm going to rest and just shake out my hands, shaking out all of that texture feeling. Letting my hands really wiggle with momentum, just however they might naturally want to wiggle. It's very relaxing for the joints. And don't worry if it seems like you're faking a lot of extra steps. You're doing something good for your body. And then rest all the way. We're going to start doing some two-handed stuff. So this is actually, you can get away with this being pretty incognito while you're out. No one will even know what you're doing. But I am gently pressing, rubbing, and activating the pad and the cuticle of my left index, while at the same time getting a big effect from my right hand as well. So just any kind of pinching, pressing, activating. In particular, if you press right on the cuticle there, as well as if you just kind of spin around. I'm going to take some real time for each finger. It's probably enough for that index. Got to make sure I go back and get my thumb at the end. This type of activity, that can be a great habit to build up. And if you're on the telephone, if you're Zooming, just activate each finger. And I think actually because it's a different kind of work, notice all that forearm action I'm getting on my right hand. I'm going to do 3 fingers on one hand. I'm going to switch to the other hand just to give it a break, to not overdo things. Again, making sure I'm really pressing at the cuticle. Third finger on this hand. And now I'm going to go back and get my thumb on that first hand. And pinky finger on my first hand. And now returning to that second hand, getting my thumb, and then I'll get my pinky finger as well. Continuing to activate the cuticle. These spaces on our hands in yoga and yoga therapy are called marma points, like mama with an R in it. And a marma point is similar to reflexology or acupressure. You get more benefits in your whole body from these points than just benefits in your fingers. And very powerful points of activity. So once we finish this last hand, we're going to pause, tune in to notice the impact. Notice how we feel having activated those points. Another important set of marma points are the webbed spaces between our fingers. So we can just clasp our hands and maybe even pulse, or we can release and grab. I think about if your aim is good. And let's try to do both versions. So the natural fit, for me, natural fit is right finger on top. I'm right-handed, but there are like every combination. It's not a right-handed thing to be right hand on top. So I'm also doing left on top. And just once in a while, shifting sides, pulse a few times, shift sides, pulse a few times. You might find that you need to be more gentle on that side that's not intuitive. This is just an effortless way to activate those webbed spaces. If you have more time, we don't, we're almost done. You could pinch and roll and activate all of those webbed spaces. So if you are feeling inspired to keep going, that could be an activity that you do later on. This way, grabbing and pulsing, we're able to activate all of those webbed spaces at the same time. Let's give a little extra attention to our thumbs. So you can see I'm just interlinking and pulsing, and then the other side. So massaging and activating that webbed space between the index and the thumb. I think all my fellow hand quilters out there, sewers, probably knitters too, will feel that. And we'll pause to notice the effects. And our last, well, we'll see how much time we have. Our next marma point is the center of our palm. So here we can just gently press that with our thumb. Feels easier to have my palm facing my body to do that. But any kind of pressing, rotating, pulsing, activating of the center of the hand. This is in particular a great spot on our body for digestion, for our metabolism. And back to the other hand. Now again, if you've got more time, you could turn this into a whole palm grid of just making a grid and gently pressing your way across your entire hand. So those two activities, your webbed spaces and your palm grid, that could take you another 20 minutes on your walk if you do them thoughtfully. But here I'm just activating my marma point, pressing into the center of my palm. And then I'll relax, just pausing to notice the effects. And then I'm gonna pop on down here. Let's see what I got for my total steps here. 4,900. So that's a lot of steps for somebody who started the day at 1,500. Leave me a comment. Do you like this? Is it fun to move and do hand yoga at the same time? What other things do you think you could multitask with? We've got some other videos that I'm coming out with right now that are for a couch potato. If you are watching TV on the couch, what can you do? So what other spaces do you think that we could do hand yoga in? And I will try to make a video for you about that. But definitely pause, notice this, and try to watch the video a few times so that you can remember these movements and take advantage of them anytime that you are walking or standing in line. All right, have a wonderful time. Remember to subscribe so that you get all the hand yoga and some quilting tips too. Bye-bye.